Okay, this video is kind of part two in the discussion of Windows versus Linux, which is better. And in the previous video, I discussed some of the challenges and some of the issues with Linux and whether or not you really want to make a move from Windows to Linux because of some of the difficulties. Now, if you have decided that you do want to go try out Linux or install Linux, this video will try and give you some good information on how to install it, how to configure Linux, and maybe which version to try out. There are many versions, and hopefully get you up and running in Linux. And again, I'm going to focus on installing it as a virtual machine using this VirtualBox by Oracle. In the previous video, I suggested that if you're going to be playing around with operating systems, I strongly recommend you try something like this VirtualBox because it really makes it a lot easier to handle multiple operating systems without having to have dual boot or triple boot or having separate computers just configured with one operating system. In this case, I've got on my Windows 10 machine in the background, I've got Windows 10 running. I've also got Linux Ubuntu in another window, and we discussed Ubuntu last time. And I've also got my preferred Linux, which is Mint, in a third window. So I've got two Linux versions running in separate windows and my Windows 10 operating in the background. So again, it's very nice to be able to try out different operating system versions and have them running concurrently at the same time. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to stop this version of Linux called Mint, and I'm going to uninstall it, basically erase it from my system, and then go through and show you how to reinstall and configure it. Now, another thing about this virtual machine is I can very quickly just erase an operating system from my hard drive and reinstall it rather quickly and get up and running again. So if I have any problems or I just want to get rid of it, it's really fairly straightforward. So let me go through, and you can see how this Mint version of Linux is very Windows-like, which is one reason I like it. So go into Quit, and I will shut it down and wait for it to shut down. And once it's done shutting down completely, here it's powered off. So now what I can do is just remove that from my system, delete all files, and now it's gone. All right. So now what I want to do is I want to download the operating system, the Mint operating system, and reinstall it on my virtual machine. Now, how do I do that? Well, if you want to get Linux Mint, you go to linuxmint.com in the download section, and I've got it here, Linux Mint, and you can see the download links for 4 different desktop versions and 32-bit or 64-bit. Now, as is usually the case with Linux, there's a lot of choices, and often you have no clue what choice to make. I can give you a suggestion here. I'm running 64-bit on my machine. You probably are too. These Cinnamon, Mate, XFCE, and KDE are different desktop versions. They're similar but different. Cinnamon is very popular. I tried Cinnamon quite a while ago and had a problem with a video driver, and other people have had that similar problem where it doesn't recognize the video driver, and you get into a problem with guest additions and all kinds of problems. So I erased that and installed Mate and never had the problem. So again, you got different versions, but they react differently. So it's, again, with Linux, you've got Linux, but it's not the same thing. You've got so many different versions. So you just have to try things out and see what works. So I am using Mate. I like Mate. I've used it for a long time, and it seems to work much better. So I use that. So all you do here is you click on this, you download what is called a .iso file. All right. An ISO file is basically what's needed by this VirtualBox to boot up and install that version of the operating system. So I've already done that. So what I'm going to do is I need to set up a new virtual machine so that I can run that new version that I just downloaded. So I go to New, and I will give it a name, Mint Mate 18, so it's version 18, and it's Linux, and I will say the version is, there is no Mint, so I'll just choose Other Linux. Okay, so this is just a name you give to the operating system that when you for the virtual machine, when you see it here in the list, it will say Mint Mate, and it's a Linux and it's another. Now, these are important settings you need to do here to set up the virtual machine. Memory size. This is how much memory out of your system memory on your main machine to allocate in megabytes for this virtual machine. Now, I've got 12 gigabytes on my machine, so I know Windows needs probably 4, and I think I've set up 2 for Ubuntu. Here I can set up, generally for an operating system, I want at least 2 gigabytes. In Linux, you probably need less than that, but I like to be safe. So I like to set this up at 2048 for the memory size, and it will allocate that much so I can run that in the window. Then I go next. This sets up a hard disk that this operating system can access. Basically, it's separating out a part of your system hard drive on your main machine to be used for this virtual operating system. And this just says create the virtual hard disk now, and I want to do that. I want to create it. Now, the different virtual machine managers use different types of files to contain the virtual machine. So basically, this virtual machine is a file on my hard drive that it's a separate file, and in this case with VirtualBox it uses a VDI file. Other types of virtual machine managers use different files, but we're using VirtualBox, so it will use a VDI. So just select VDI, go to Next, and here you can decide whether it's a fixed size hard drive or a dynamically allocated. You can toss a coin. I use dynamically allocated. Now, the file size and location basically means on your hard drive how much hard drive space should I allocate to this virtual machine. And for my Linux Mint, I am going to use 20 gigabytes. All right? You don't want to run out. You want to have enough to store all your files. So I'm going to do that, 20 gigabytes. And now I have got my virtual machine set up so that I can now load the .iso file that I just downloaded and load up my my Linux Mint. Now, before I do that, I want to select this and go into settings and make sure I've got some things set up first. The one thing I want to do is display, make sure I've enabled 3D acceleration, and video memory, you might crank that up to 32 megabytes, and then now you're set up. Now, to load that ISO file and load up Mint, I'll go into Start, and it will start up and ask me where do I get my ISO file. So here's this, it says select startup disk, and it's just looking for your ISO file. So I will do that, and here I've got my Mate ISO that I just downloaded. So I will select that, open, and then it will start, and it will start installing Linux Mint in this virtual machine. So here it's got Linux Mint. It's going to boot and start installing that. Okay, so now you've got the installation screen in your virtual machine. You've set up a virtual machine. You've got a window that is ready to install Linux Mint. Now, to do that, I just double click on this Install Linux Mint, and it will go through and it will start installing. And this is going to take about 15 minutes or so. It's going to ask you what language. I'll say English. Install third-party software. I want to do that for graphics, Wi-Fi, and some other software you're going to need. So select that, hit continue. And now it's going to say to erase the disk and install Linux Mint. And I'm going to select that. And now it's going to go through and it's going to install. I hit continue and it will install it on that drive. I'll select New York is my location. I'll say I've got an English keyboard, continue, and I'll say my name is Joe Blow, and my username is Joe Blow. I'll put in a password and continue, and now it will start installing Linux. And this is going to take about 15 minutes, so I'll let it install and get back to you. Okay, so now we have installed Linux Mint, and if your virtual machine window went black, just wiggle your mouse. It probably just fell asleep. So now we're ready to restart the virtual machine, and your installation of Linux Mint will be complete. And we're going to do a couple things first to configure it to make sure it's set the way you want. Here it says remove installation media. Just hit enter. And you should be ready to go. Okay, so now you are at the entry point for Linux Mint, and it's asking you to select a username, and our username is Joe Blow. So we will do that, enter the password, and here you go. Now you'll notice that this window, this GUI, is very much like Windows, Microsoft Windows. Starts up with Linux Mint 18 Sarah, that's the version, and you can kill this dialog on startup. And if you look around, you've got your launcher on the bottom, and it's got your list of folders. You've got a terminal window, which is very important. You need to keep that. And you've got Firefox, and you can add others here. And if you click on the left, kind of like a start menu, and it's got the installed applications right here. Then you hit all applications, and you can see everything that's installed. And the first thing we're going to do is, since this is running on a Windows 10 machine, we're probably going to want to access a folder or some folders on that Windows 10 machine in our Linux Mint virtual machine. So what we will do in order to share a file from Windows 10, we go to Devices, Shared Folders. Now this is a feature of the VirtualBox software that allows you to share folders between the host Windows 10 and the guest Linux Mint. So we go Devices, Shared Folders, Shared Folder Settings. And here we click on Machine Folders and add a plus to add a new shared folder. And it's going to ask you what the path is. So we go to, well, I've got mine on backup, and I go to Documents Shared with Linux. I just made a folder there. Select that, and it will give it this default folder name. You can change it if you want. But it's important you select Auto Mount and Make Permanent. So every time you load up Linux Mint, it's available and you can share it. So hit OK, OK, and you would expect that you can now share that folder. Well, this is Linux. No, you got to do one more thing. And you need to go down to this terminal, click on it, and you're going to have to enter a command. And it's going to be this command you have to type in. sudo user mod -a space -G v box sf shared folder, and your username. And mine is Joe Blow. It's going to ask for the password, and now you have shared that folder between Windows 10 and Linux Mint. So now you hit exit, and the only thing you need to do now is restart your virtual machine, your Linux Mint virtual machine. So go in Start, Quit, and hit Restart. So enter your password. Okay. And there you go. Shared folder SF, document shared with Linux. And you can click on that and it will give you, there's nothing in that folder right now, but it's ready to go. So it's fairly straightforward. Yeah, you do have to do a command line, but welcome to Linux. Now, once you've got that, you are ready to go. And now what you need to do is you can probably start with a setting. Now remember, when we were installing this, the screen went to sleep and went black. It may not for you, but here you can click on Screensaver, and here it says regard the computer as idle after 5 minutes. I'm taking these off so it never goes to sleep. So close that, and now you can notice how there are a lot of things available to you in this Mint version that gives you a lot of control. It's more like Windows, where you've got control over a lot of things, where in Ubuntu it doesn't default with all of this. You've got power management, Bluetooth. You got a lot of things available here. It's one reason why I like this. Okay, so now what you can do is you can look at all of the applications that are installed by default. And another thing I like about Mint is it installs a lot of applications by default. It's got your Firefox, and you can go in here and see all of the things that are installed. So for example, graphics. GIMP is a very good Photoshop-like image editor, and that's installed by default. Office, it's got LibreOffice installed by default. We talked about that before. Sound and video, it's got VLC Media Player, which is my favorite media player. System tools, system monitor, terminal, administration. It's got a lot of things here, domain blocker. So it does have a lot of things installed automatically, which I like. If you want some others, go to Software Manager, enter your password, and it will give you the option of downloading any other software you want. Now here is all the available software, and it says 83,656 packages are currently available. So you've got 83,000 software applications that are available from here, and there could be more. You got programming, you've got all kinds of programming stuff. If you're a developer like me, you've got a bunch of choices. You can go Office, you can go graphics, you've got Blender, you've got GIMP, you've got photography, publishing, viewers, whole ton of different things for that. So you've got a lot of choices. Like I mentioned in the previous video, if you use some very specialized applications or some Microsoft applications that you want, you may not have the direct application available here, but you might have something similar, though you may have to learn how to use it. So hopefully that will get you going. It'll show you how to share things. It'll show you how to load up your applications. And importantly, it will show you how to run a operating system in a separate virtual machine. So hope that helps. Take care and have a really good day.